And there are students who may feel that the idea of what you're doing is so daunting, like it's almost impossible. So you might want to talk about the process, and how I mean, I look at it as freedom. There, the freedom to write, um, in the way that you want to write, and the freedom to break out of these boundaries. So, how do you go about that for those who are still, um, for the beginners, but also those who are writing, but are really getting writer's block precisely because of these confining spaces?
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot. Uh, Gosh, where do I even begin? I think first I'll start with writer's block. I don't believe writer's block exists. I don't acknowledge its presence. It's not something I discuss. If I get stuck, I'm stuck, and I'll wait. I'll wait, relax, and go do something else. Or if I'm writing something that's boring me, or that I feel like I just don't know where the story's going or whatever, sometimes you need to put something aside. If it's boring you shouldn't be writing it. For me, if I'm writing a scene and it's boring, that's one clear implication that I should cut the scene. I don't do boredom very well at all. If it bores me, I'm not doing it. So there's that. I've always from the beginning, and probably it has a lot to do with the way I started writing. I write what I want to write. I'm not afraid to write what I want to write, because the stories that I was when I first started writing, I mean, my whole journey to being like knowing that I was a creative, understand, and I always was a creative, always was. I just I didn't name it, first of all.
Okay.
And I didn't, I came from a family that was very much was very kind of medicine oriented. Both of my parents were doctors, and they're both Nigerian immigrants, and Nigerian families, you become a doctor, engineer, or lawyer, or failure. Like, the other thing is a failure. You don't go into the arts. You do not go into the arts. It's not the norm. It is not something that's expected of you. So it took me a while to get to the point where I acknowledged this thing that was in me. It's always there. Um, and I wrote a short memoir about, it's called Broken Places and Outer Spaces, where I talked about, that jump, like what got me to write stories. Because like many artists, um, my journey to writing and to creating the stories myself was through a trauma. And for me, it was paralysis. Like, I literally was paralyzed from a surgery. I was an athlete, and I was a paralyzed athlete. And it's a long story to tell. I won't go. So, but if you want to know about it, I wrote it in this memoir called Broken Places and Outer Spaces. But it was while sitting in that hospital bed that I started writing. And the reason was to save myself. Like, I knew that I was a paralyzed athlete. I went from being a super athlete who could just do anything easily to being stuck in a hospital bed where I couldn't move, where I couldn't even turn over, and like half of my body was like invisible. You could have cut my legs off, I wouldn't have known. It was like that. And so I turned to the page and just started writing these stories to myself. And that was what, like, just the joy of that, and like, I discovered storytelling while in that hospital bed. So because that was how I started writing, and from that point on, never stopped writing. Like, I had to learn how to walk that summer and return to U of I, walking with a cane. Went from this mega athlete to walking with a cane, but I was writing these stories. And like, because that was how I started, I write what I want. Like, it's not something where I'm writing for other people. Like, I'm writing to get published. I wrote for 8 years without a thought of getting published. I wrote 4 or 5 full-blown, finished, completed, edited, polished, readable novels without a thought of getting them published. That was never my goal. So I'd finish a novel after going through the editing process, and then put it aside and start a new one, and just keep doing that because I enjoyed it so much. And because of that, when my creative writing teacher was like, "Oh, you should try to get this short story published," and that was the first thing that was the first time. This was after 8 years where I tried to get something published. And then that road led me to publishing my first novel and all of that. But like that, because of that process, because of the way that I got into it, I've always like, I don't, when I'm writing something, I'm not thinking, oh, well, people want to read this. Cause a lot of new writers tell me that, or ask me that. They're like, I'm scared that nobody's going to want to read this narrative. That has been a question I have never asked myself. Never asked myself that. Like, it doesn't cross my mind, because I want to read what I'm writing, you know? And so I write it because I want to read it. And I enjoy the process, and I enjoy the outcome, you know? So really that's, and everything that I'm doing now, I'm doing so much now. I'm doing more than I have ever done. I couldn't even list, we wouldn't have time for me to list all the projects that I'm working on. Some of them are for film, some of them are for TV, some of them are novels. I have 2 novels. Some of them are graphic novels, some of them are comics, all at the same time right now. And the way that I got to doing this was bit by bit. It's just, you know, I do things. I'm one of those who I'm happiest in chaos. I'm happiest in chaos. So I'm not a planner. When I write, I don't plan. I don't outline. I just start. And then it just goes where I need to go. It takes me where it needs to take me. And I've learned to trust that process, and it works every time. And so like I exist in this like chaotic state with all of these projects, but somehow there's something in me that organizes it all and knows when to do what, and is able to function within that. And it's been like gradual, because when I first started, I was all, you know, I would only write a novel at a time. And I still do, I only write 1 novel at a time, but I couldn't work on other things. It had to be just focus. And so, but over time, I've learned how to work on multiple things, like kind of in the same room, though not at the same time, if that makes sense. And slowly I've added more things and added more things and added more things. So now I'm just working on so many, like I jump from world to world, like every 3 or 4 days, I jump into another world, you know, and you know, it's been gradual though. It's been gradual. I wrote my first story in 19, probably 94 or 95, one of those. And it's been gradual. Like learning how to do this, learning how to multitask has been it's been a gradual learning process. So these are skills that I've kind of pulled in over time.